And a very happy Tuesday to you at 12:07 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
Johnny, it's official. As we are speaking right now, Barbara Lee Speaks for Me is getting sworn in as the next mayor of Oakland.
Quite frankly.
Well, I'm sure they're waiting on bated breath for that $50 an hour minimum wage.
I play you the sound, but the way they have it set up, the woman who's asking the oath questions has the mic, and Barbara Lee does not.
Well, I can only imagine what she's going to have to say.
Good luck, Oakland. We wish you the best.
And you're going to need a whole lot of luck.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Right before showtime, my cell phone went off, and it was my insurance agent, who I have been with for many moons. I'm a customer of State Farm, and there is a local broker who I deal with. And the local broker's office gave me a call, and I got a pit in my stomach at that moment in time because I thought to myself, they are calling to let me know that they are dropping me as a customer, and I am going to have to go on the open market trying to find insurance in the state of California with Gavin Newsom and Ricardo Lara in charge. After I answered the phone, I said, "Hi." She says, "Hello. This is a courtesy call from your State Farm agent's office." I said, "Oh, is that so? What do you have for me?" And she said, "Your rates are going way up." And people keep calling the office thinking it's a mistake, but no, that's in fact your new premium, and this is what you're going to have to pay from now on. And then she went on a diatribe against Ricardo Lara, which I enjoyed every minute of.
Absolutely.
Love how the brokers hate his guts, even as he has given State Farm everything they've ever wanted and more.
If you think we hate him, you should have heard this woman go off on him.
She want to snatch his wig?
I think everyone does at this point.
And I may be criticized and dragged through the mud for it and get my wig snatched, as the gay guys say.
So State Farm went to Ricardo Lara and asked for a dramatic rate increase. He said yes, but you're going to have to prove your case at a hearing. They had the hearing. He did not attend the hearing, and he gave them their rate increase.
17% for homeowners, 38% for landlords of rental property.
And get this, State Farm has now announced that they're going back to Ricardo Lara and asking for an additional rate increase.
Not even a week after Ricardo Lara approved the emergency rate hike that takes effect in June, State Farm filed for yet another rate hike.
And if you think this is from The Onion, it's not. It's actually happening.
For more, here is NBC Bay Area.
State Farm is asking for another rate hike after securing a rate increase just last week. Today in the Bay's Ginger Conejero-Saab joins us live in San Francisco this morning. And Ginger, many homeowners, boy, they just can't take anymore.
Well, they're going to have to keep taking it.
I know that this is going to make me sound like I have tinfoil on my head, but think about this. The last time we played sound from Ricardo Lara, he said, "Everyone in the state hates me. I'm aware of it, but I don't care. I did what I had to do." And now that he's shown his hand of cards, that he knows his political career is over, what he does between now and when he's termed out of office, pretty much he gets a free pass on. Because he doesn't have to worry about the voters turning on him and voting him out of office. If he's already decided that he's getting out of politics and he's moving on to some new profession, then to a certain extent, that's liberating if you know that you're going to give the insurance industry everything they want. So maybe there's more at play here than meets the eye.
He's got a year and a half to cash in on this job.
Well, Laura, you can imagine this comes right after a 17% rate increase was approved last week. Now, that takes effect 10 days from now, starting in June. But before that even takes effect, State Farm has filed for another rate increase just yesterday. So if we backtrack a little bit, State Farm initially asked for a 30% increase.
This was on the heels of another increase that they got the year before. They got a 20% increase, and then they immediately filed for a 30% increase. This was all before the devastating wildfires in the Palisades in Altadena.
And if he didn't say no to them back then, and he didn't say no to them last week, what do you think he's going to do with the next one?
It's a rate increase last year. That is before the Los Angeles fires happened. Now, since the fires, the company has argued that the losses from those SoCal fires back in January depleted its cash reserves.
Now, I don't claim to understand how any of this works. I'm in radio. But if you ever just thought about the simple math of State Farm, the state's largest insurer, has 7.8 million homeowners policies. They covered quite a bit of the Palisades and Altadena, but not that much of it because they had dropped so many people. But let's just say every single person in those burn areas was a State Farm customer. That's about, 20,000 homes? So you have 8 million policies, and you cannot cover 20,000 of them when they all file a claim?
No, fire is the new COVID. When anything went wrong in the state of California, whether it's homelessness, whether it's crime, whether it is poor test scores in the schools, well, it's COVID. They figure that gives them a free pass for any bad behavior. Well, now it's not just the government that's using the fires as an excuse for bad behavior. So is the insurance industry. If they mismanage their investments, which is what the allegation is coming from Harvey Rosenfield and others, and that's the reason that they're not on firm financial footing, they can now blame everything on the fires to get every rate hike approved.
Just last week, they were granted that 17% rate increase, but the company now says it wants the rest of that initial 30% ask.
Of course.
And they're going to get it.
So take a look at the graphic on your screen. The approved hikes are on the left for homeowners, condo owners, and renters. The full request is to the right. So how that breaks down there is State Farm is asking for 30% hike for homeowners insurance, 17% of which has been granted. The full ask is higher if you own a condo or are renting. And the state granted a 15% increase, but State Farm wants more than double that for condos and then more than triple that for renters.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa.
Now, a hearing.
And this is as they haven't written any new policies. They're not paying out claims that they're contracted to pay out in the Palisades and Altadena. We're hearing more stories about that every single day. But here we go. Let's cash in. This whole business model does not make any sense.
They're just going for the gold. This is the 5-year-old girl not asking Santa for a doll, but asking Santa for a pony.
You know what I feel has happened? State Farm has realized that you can make more money being a company that's perceived as unethical than trying to buy as much ad time as possible to perceive that you're ethical. It's the PG&E model.
From their point of view, they have an audience of one. Their audience is Ricardo Lara. And if he's in their back pocket and he's already decided that he's getting out of politics, it doesn't matter where public opinion is at all.
Now, a hearing is expected in the fall for State Farm to lay out its argument for that full ask if that request
And, of course, we know that these hearings are totally legitimate, and Ricardo Lara absolutely pays attention to what goes on in there.
There's got to be a way to just change how we do this. I know at a certain point, my dad and other people in his industry dropped their insurance policies and became self-insured for certain aspects of insurance. And that ended up working out for them much better than how it worked before. There's got to be a way to pull people together and to come up with some form of self-insurance so we don't have to be reliant on these companies.
If that request is granted, those new rates can take effect starting next year. We're live in San Francisco. Ginger Conejero Saab today in the Bay.
So there you go. A week after State Farm got their emergency rate hike request, what do? Immediately file for another rate hike.
And as all of this is going on, the poor people in the fire destruction areas in Altadena, Pacific Palisades, and Malibu are having a hell of a time rebuilding because they can't get their money from State Farm.
This is true. Yesterday, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, had a press conference in the Palisades at the site of one of the few houses that has already started construction, although it's pretty eerie because it's the only house on the block that has anything being built. The rest of it is all just demolished lots. And she was touting this as a big success. Look how great we are. We're better than paradise, which is a weird thing to compare yourself to. But then Karen Bass was asked by the reporters at this press conference if they could talk to the homeowners and ask them what's going on. And this is what happened, and I don't think Karen Bass anticipated it at all.
Are we going to be able to hear it all from the homeowners?
Absolutely.
Now, there's another one.
Thanks, Shang.
So we first broke ground to send a message that the Palisades will rise again. This is more than just rebuilding a house. It's rebuilding hope for the community, right? But we can do this alone. We see many parties stepping up to help us. But unfortunately, we don't see insurance companies doing the same.
Uh-oh.
So insurance companies aren't fulfilling their contractual obligations to the fire victims.
Specifically, State Farm.
Unless State Farm pays what's owed to us based on our policies, the progress that you see here and the momentum for the community is going to stop. So we urge...
Right now, there's some wooden frames being built, and that's as far as this project's going to go because State Farm is stonewalling this guy that Karen Bass wanted to use it as an example of how successful this is all going.
Okay, now go back to the conversation we had moments ago. If the state of California is going to force State Farm to fulfill their contractual obligations, the man who has to do it is Ricardo Lara.
This
See
guy?
where it all goes back to him?
And I might end up being the most unelectable person.
Oh, not might. You are.
Congratulations.
So we urge that there's a need for insurance companies to step up, to follow through with the city and what everyone else is doing. So
they have no incentive to. They're getting their rate increases whether they're fulfilling their contracts or not. And we've heard so many stories from people in the Palisades and Altadena of State Farm specifically, because it's the largest insurer, not fulfilling their end of the bargain.
And what's going to happen is if they just drag this out as long as possible, these people, these victims, are going to get frustrated, and they're just going to want to wash their hands with it and move on and start fresh somewhere else.
As much as Karen Bass and even Rick Caruso want to say that's not happening, for a lot of people, especially the seniors that live in those communities, that's definitely happening. And unfortunately, they're selling out to people lowballing them for their empty lots, and they're getting out.
Why would you want this to be your life for the next 3 years? I certainly wouldn't.
Karen Bass was also asked, hey, why is this the only house on the block that's being rebuilt?
So we have one home here, but if you look all around us, there's nothing else. Why do you think there's only one home going up right now? Well, I mean, I think that these homeowners, and again, they can certainly speak to this. It's my understanding that you originally built this house 3 years ago? Correct. And so for them to begin rebuilding again, they submitted the same plans that they used before. It's the same builder? Different builder. So it was probably...
So the only house that's being constructed is one that they had the exact plan and permit that they did 3 years ago. But if your house is older than 3 years, you have to go through the whole hell of permitting.
So they already went through the nightmare, and they're not going to force them to go through the nightmare again.
So it was probably easier for them. But as you know, for each and every homeowner, the circumstances are different. I will tell you that the insurance issue that you raised, I just came from a meeting with all the local elected officials.
Oh, yeah. See, this is the other thing. People that are going through the process of wanting to rebuild cannot get their empty lots insured. And on top of that, Apparently, these homeowners, I found this out yesterday, they're being told they need to get liability insurance in case someone hurts themselves on their empty lot.
Okay, to be fair, we can't blame that on Karen Bass. That is Ricardo Lara's fault.
I was in a meeting with the councilwoman, Tracy Park, the state senator, Ben Allen, the supervisor, Lindsay Horvath, and the number one topic was the insurance industry.
Well, why wasn't Ricardo Lara at that meeting?
Yeah, wouldn't he be relevant?
And figuring out what we can do on a local but also on a state level to make sure that the insurance industry follows through and make sure that they issue the payments they need to make, but that they insure these homes moving forward.
This is a disaster, and this is not going to get better anytime soon. If you cannot get insurance, you're not going to rebuild. And if the insurance companies aren't going to pay out your claim, you can't afford to rebuild.
And in a one-party state, she's a Democrat. Horvath is a Democrat. Ben Allen is a Democrat. They're all Democrats. So is Ricardo Lara. He's the problem. She knows he's the problem, but she won't criticize him because that's shooting inside the tent.
Absolutely.
So we just have to pretend like there's some sort of existential problem, but not call it out by name. So the problem will not get fixed. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to go back and listen to a show from last week or yesterday's show or anything that you missed out on and you want to hear, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes, and you can listen to all of Ricardo Lara's nonsense that we have had to feature over the last few years.
Absolutely.
There is a man in San Francisco who was made famous for being someone who, well, was the personification of the revolving door between the court system and the streets. He's a career criminal, would be caught, would get arrested, and would be released promptly. And this happened over and over and over again. But, Randy, the script might be changing now.
I am so happy to report that after 2.5 years of following the saga of repeat car burglar Robert Sanza, the man who has broken into cars and evaded police, gotten arrested, and got out over and over and over again for 2.5 years, that Dan Noyes at ABC 7 has been covering extensively, is finally going to prison.
Good.
This is a story that we have been talking about for about 2.5 years as soon as we saw what Dan Noyes was reporting on. And it is unbelievable how many times this guy has got a slap on the wrist and yet another chance. But it shows you, even with making the arrest and having a great district attorney in San Francisco, the system is stacked against putting people in prison.
But finally, the people of San Francisco might be safe from this guy.
Well, he's getting sentenced to 3 years, so he'll probably get out in, 3 months?
That's true.
For more, here's ABC 7 and the great investigative reporter, Dan Noyes.
A San Francisco Superior Court judge keeps his promise, sending a serial car burglar to state prison after yet another arrest. Good evening.
By the way, this is a story that's been going on so long. His initial charges go back to the Chesa Boudin days, where, you remember this? He was running from the cops and ran over an officer's foot.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And Chesa Boudin dropped all of those charges and just charged him with petty theft.
Well, the high cost of housing is a problem.
Good evening. I'm Amma Dates.
And I'm Dan Ashley. Thanks for joining us. This comes after the ABC 7 News I-team dug into the suspect's record, showing how judge after judge let him go with just a few months in jail, only to reoffend.
Yeah, I-team reporter Dan Noyes is here with the latest on this. Dan.
Well, Amma and Dan, Robert Sanza came to my attention 2 years ago.
It's so funny. Usually the way I find these stories is because I subscribe to all of these channels on YouTube. Sometimes these videos just pop up in my feed when I'm eating dinner or whatever. And I see a story from ABC 7 about a repeat thief. And I'm looking at it, just skimming through it with the sound off to see if Dan Noyes is going to say the name Robert Sanza, because I remember that name.
Well, we've done the story how many times?
At least 5.
Well, Amman Dan, Robert Sanza came to my attention 2 years ago. He was the first arrest under the SFPD's bait car campaign. Despite more than a dozen arrests for all sorts of felonies, he avoided state prison until now.
This is how insane our system got in the state of California.
And again, as Randy said before, it's possible they're going to let this guy out in 3 months because now he's in Gavin Newsom's custody.
I mean, let's not forget, in Los Angeles, Tesla road rage guy got sentenced to 5 years, and he served a little under 10 months.
Before he got arrested in Hawaii yet again.
I watched in January as 27-year-old Robert Sanza pled guilty to his latest felonies: receiving stolen property, accessory after the fact, possession of a firearm by a felon, concealed firearm in a vehicle, possession of ammunition.
Holy cow.
Is there any laws this guy hasn't broken?
It's pretty much got a checklist going.
Judge Bruce E. Chan sentenced Sanza to 3 years, 8 months in state prison, but stayed it, allowing him to leave jail after 4 months. San Francisco.
Why?
Because he's clearly learned his lesson, Randy.
San Francisco District Attorney Brooke Jenkins wanted Sanza to serve state prison time right away.
We were prepared to go to trial. We wanted to see accountability for a man that has continued to victimize people in San Francisco and wreak havoc on our streets.
Over the past 5 years,
was 3 strikes really a bad thing?
3 strikes was a great thing. The problem with 3 strikes is it became a victim of its own success. We identified the people who have demonstrated that they could not behave in a normal way with the rest of us, and we put them in prison, and we kept them there. Then crime rates dropped to record lows, and people said, why are we spending so much money on prisons and not education? And then we started letting them all out.
And what's funny is we've been letting them all out for about 15 years now, and we've cut the prison population in half, yet the prison budget doesn't go down, so that cost per inmate has now skyrocketed to $150,000. And that's mostly because even though the prison guards have half of the inmates they used to, they've been getting massive raises thanks to Gavin Newsom every year.
It's funny how that works.
Over the past 5 years, Sanza has been arrested more than a dozen times. He has convictions for car burglary, grand theft, hit and run, shoplifting, domestic violence, and more. He has a history of breaking into cars and running from police. In February of 2022, Sanza ran over an officer's foot with a stolen car at the Japantown garage.
That's the one that Chesa Boudin said, nah, we don't need to do anything about that.
Let's give the guy a pass. He deserves a break in life.
That was the turning point. It was nonsense like that, which was got voters to organize, collect signatures, and overwhelmingly vote to kick Chesa Boudin out.
Well, there's no way you can be intellectually honest and defend that.
Less than 3 months later, he rammed into 2 patrol cars, injuring officers, damaging several houses, and a civilian's car before police caught him in Chinatown after a foot race.
You know what we need to do? We need to have ABC7 team up with an actuary to see if we can just get a number. How much has this one guy cost the city of San Francisco and the state of California by not being in prison?
I would guess it's 8 figures.
Last September, Sanza admitted working with a juvenile accomplice to break into cars at the Palace of Fine Arts. Still, Judge Chan wanted to give Sanza another chance and let him out of jail.
Can't you just judge shop and find someone who's not mentally defective?
Well, unfortunately, whether it's San Francisco or Los Angeles, this is the majority of the judges that are either elected or appointed now.
And again, who appoints the judges? Gavin Newsom.
But in March, Sanza was arrested for grand theft at the San Jose Macy's and for another car burglary in San Francisco.
Did not surprise.
That was after the, hey, this is your last chance. It was a Janice Hahn warning over and over and over again to this guy.
That's your final warning.
And surprise, surprise, he didn't change his behavior.
Did not surprise me. That has been Mr. Sanza's pattern of behavior for some time now.
Late last week, Judge Chan revoked Sanza's probation, sentencing him to 3 years, 8 months in state prison, and addressed his disagreement with DA Brooke Jenkins. Quote, what occurred was a difference of opinion in how to protect...
A difference of opinion?
No. It's you not being in touch with reality.
She said, this guy's a repeat offender, will not learn his lesson. We need to keep him away from the public. And he said, now we're going to give him one more chance.
It was a difference of opinion.
What occurred was a difference of opinion in how to protect the public and property.
And what happened? The public and the property were not protected because you let this guy out.
You were wrong.
And how to ensure that Mr. Sansa would not reoffend.
We're pleased that the judge held him to the agreement that they had, and now will have him suffer a true consequence. It is quite unfortunate, however, that we've got other victims now who have had to suffer at the hands of Mr. Sansa in the interim time.
The public defender read a statement saying it's worth giving second chances in many cases.
Second?
Yeah, that public defender, the statements that they made were totally outrageous the last time we did this. I know it's their job. I know that's what they're supposed to do. And usually a lot of these people just go through the motions because that's the role that you play in the process. But the public defender was a zealot in this case.
But to have the gall to say he deserves second chance, we're on 17th chance. At what point do we admit this person cannot belong in a civilized society? And that's what prison is for.
If you keep him out of jail long enough, eventually he's going to break into the public defender's car.
The public defender read a statement saying it's worth giving second chances in many cases.
While it didn't work out in this situation with Robert, unfortunately, there are still countless individuals, so many people who remain out of the criminal justice system because someone gave them a second chance or even third or fourth chance.
Spoken like a true public defender.
This is why whenever local elections come up and people are running for judge and it says what their profession is, if it says public defender, you do not vote for that person to become a judge because that's how we got here.
Run for the hills.
I also got reaction today from two of Sansa's victims.
Oh, is it the Idaho couple? I think it's the Idaho couple. You remember this, right? This is the Idaho couple that got their rental car broken into, all of their luggage, their iPad stolen, and nothing could be done about it. And Sansa was the guy.
No, and the judge said tough potatoes.
Well, and because of the car break-in loophole that has only now been fixed after 5 years of Scott Wiener trying to push it through, they could not charge this guy with a car break-in unless that couple from Idaho went in person to the court to attest that they knew the door was locked, even though there was broken glass everywhere.
Sounds like a good use of everyone's time.
Tourists who lost cash, a $1,200 iPad, and a $3,500 laptop when he broke into their rental car while they toured Alcatraz in 2023.
It's ridiculous it's went through all this, and it seems like there should be more time than that. But, you know, I mean, that's, you know, at least he's following through with what he had said he would do.
Well, I guess my big thing is look at all that nice money all of you California taxpayers had to pay for all this joke of a mess that he's done.
They get it.
I mean, that's just sad.
Sansa still has to.
And, of course, the ripple effect is that couple gets victimized. They tell all their friends and family and neighbors never to go to San Francisco. And then that's even more tourism dollars that the city and the state loses every single time something like this happens. Because what do you know? The number one target of bippers is rental cars.
And that's a huge part of our economy.
Sansa still has to face the felony grand theft charge from San Jose. The DA's office there says he has a $10,000 warrant for failing to attend a hearing. Dan.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
There you go. Robert Sansa finally going to prison. For how long? We'll find out, I guess.
It is just unreal. Just unreal that they did that. The Fix California Hour coming up after the news at 1. So yesterday, Randy, we talked about all of these books that are coming out about the presidential campaign in 2024. And even though Donald Trump was the winner of the race, most of the focus was on the Democratic side of the aisle because Joe Biden did something that we haven't seen happen, I don't think, in the history of the United States, which is secure the required number of delegates to win the nomination, and then drop out of the race and endorse your vice president. But that's exactly what he did. And then Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, and it looked like she started moving up in the polls, and then Donald Trump soundly defeated her. And people are wondering, well, what happened behind the scenes that caused that chain reaction, which is so atypical in the history of the United States, to occur? And that's when we got all of these books. I guess Jake Tapper's book is out right now, and Megyn Kelly just skewered him when he's out trying to sell the book for participating in the cover-up of Joe Biden's condition. But there was another book called Fight that I talked about yesterday. I read that book over the weekend, and I can't tell you the number of emails that we got from listeners asking us for the title of the book because they have vacation plans coming up, air travel coming up, whatever the case may be, and they wanted to read it and find out just exactly what happened for themselves.
You know, we got to get with sales. We're going to have a new segment, Johnny's Political Gossip Book Club.
Yeah, we're not getting a cut of this book, but let me tell you, I think we sold hundreds of those babies.
There's a lot of drama in that book. Although, the thing that's so funny about this, I didn't read the book, but I listened to the authors interviewed on Gavin Newsom's podcast where they talked about everything in that book except for the parts about Gavin Newsom.
Well, I'll tell you what else is funny about what happened or what was discussed in that book that I didn't have time to mention yesterday. Tim Walz actively campaigned for the vice presidential nomination, and he did so by calling Nancy Pelosi. Even though he's the governor of Minnesota, he used to be the congressman from a rural district in Minnesota, and he was one of Nancy Pelosi's reliable votes. So he called Pelosi and said, I think I would be a great addition to the ticket, and she promoted Tim Walz. She wanted someone from the House, someone who she had a relationship with, to be in that White House. And boy, did she push Tim Walz hard. And almost immediately after picking him, they realized they made a massive mistake. And I guess when they were doing the debate prepping him for his debate with J.D. Vance, it was Mayor Pete who played the role of J.D. Vance. And Mayor Pete sliced and diced Tim Walz like he was a piece of chicken at Benihana's. And all of them sitting in the room realized in that moment that that debate was going to be a disaster.